Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast, and today we're going to be talking about everything from refurbished tech devices, e-waste, and the great digital divide. And today's guest is Biju Nair, and he's the EVP and President of the Global Connected Living Business Unit at Assurant. And he oversees the refurbishment and recycling of connected devices for Assurant, which did repurpose more than 17 million devices last year for companies far and wide, from AT&T and Vodafone to Vodafone. So today we're going to discuss how many mobile phones and connected devices consumers get rid of each year, how they're repurposed, and what we should all be doing with those old devices that we have sitting in a drawer. And yes, we know we all have them, right? No matter where you're listening in the world, there's going to be a drawer of some description of forgotten tech. So buckle up and hold on tight, because today I'm going to beam your ears all the way to Chicago, where Biju is waiting to join us today. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Biju Nair, and I am currently the EVP and President of Global Connected Living at Assurant, and I also have responsibilities for Assurant International.
Fantastic. And I'd love to take you back in time to where this all began. Can I ask you to share your origin story, where your passion for tech came from, and or a moment that would just put you on this path you're on today?
No, absolutely. Would love to share that. So I'm a native of India. I grew up there, and then got my college education in electronics and computer engineering in Europe. I studied in Poland, of all the places, if you can believe it. I'm one of the few people who look Indian and can speak Polish fluently. Then for the last 30 some years, I've been living in the United States. And my passion for technology, I have to say, started, I wanted to be an engineer. That was, I wanted to do something in engineering. Was not quite sure whether, when I was growing up, civil engineering was the big deal in India, but I was not, that much into construction and civil engineering and understanding of that. And the computer science was just emerging as this field that has a lot of potential and demand for it. And I remember during my undergraduate years, I took a class in computer architecture, which was a unique class because it not only taught the theory, but it also involved you into programming a few things. And we had to write this little program in this lab, which, basically I wrote the code and it would move this robotic arm and pick up like a cup or something and move it from one place to another, just a simple movement. And I was just fascinated by the fact that I can write a bunch of code and make things like this happen. So I just decided that that's where I wanted to focus on. And from there on, I have always focused on software development in various aspects of things. But for the vast majority of my professional career, I've focused on telecommunications, software and telecommunications arena. I've been very fortunate to be a part of 4 different startups that have all been very successful. And just going back in time, my very first opportunity was when I was still in grad school. So I have a electronics and computer engineering undergrad and master's degree, and a second master's degree in computer science. And when I was doing the second master's degree, I saw this advertisement in the paper that said they were looking for a software engineer who has experience or has an interest in dealing with large data sets. And this is going back 1992, 1993. So it was before all this big data activities were fashionable. And I had just studied and done a project in C++, which was the object-oriented programming language. So as has been always the case in my career, without really knowing what I'm getting into, I applied for the job, interviewed for it, and got the job. And this was for a company at that time called Safeco Corporation. And the job was around, they were in the test and measurement field. So I'm sure you've seen the Verizon wireless commercial in the United States with a guy walking around hearing, "Can you hear me now?" right? He's
Yes.
testing the network and proving that the network is really good. Obviously, that's not how they test the network. The way they drive test networks. So they mount all of this automatic equipment into a big van, and they drive around, metro areas and gather data on how the network is performing, and then they troubleshoot any areas that is not working. So that was what the business that Safeco was in, except they did not have a software for analyzing all of this data, because you can imagine it collects a massive amount of data. So you need a good piece of software that is capable of loading all of this up, visualizing it, easily troubleshooting areas without having to go through, hundreds and hundreds of gigabytes of data. So that's what they wanted to do, and I got into it big time. I was the lone software engineering team that started the program, and then I built a team around myself, and that was just a fantastic experience because that software was one of its kind in the world. And we were able to license that at like $50,000 for each license of the software in US. And in Japan, the same software would retail for about $150,000 for each license. So it was a lot of fun working on that kind of data and visualizing how a drive test connects to different cell sites, the handoffs happening, and being able to visualize all of that and then troubleshoot it extremely easily. So that was my very first project, and from there I have always stayed within the telecommunication space. And that was also my first experience with kind of a startup, because I was hired to do software in a predominantly hardware company, and then Safeco Corporation got spun out of the main company to become Safeco Technologies, so that we are only focused on the test and measurement, software and hardware aspect of it. And ultimately, that company got acquired by Agilent Technologies, which is very well known in test and measurement space. So that was also my first experience in tech, as well as an experience in how companies are bought and sold. And then I got hooked on, and I wanted to make sure that I was a part of a startup, either doing something myself or being an entrepreneur within another company where there may be opportunities for startup.
Wow, an incredibly cool story. And of course, it would be that path that would lead you to what you're doing now at Assurant. And I'm conscious there will be some people listening that are hearing about you guys for the first time. So can you tell me a little bit more about the company and the problems that it set out to solve with technology?
Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about Assurant, and then I'll describe the path that brought me and my team here. So Assurant is a insurance/insure tech company, and we are in three main businesses. So there is a housing business which focuses on renters and lender-placed insurance. So if you're renting a property, oftentimes in the United States, you're required to get an insurance around any damage that might be caused to the property, etc. Most property owners require that. So that's a big part of our business in the housing. There's an automotive business, and both of these are run by two of my peers, which is the extended services warranty products for vehicles. And one of the more popular solutions that we have rolled out is around electrical vehicles. It's called EV1, because electrical vehicles require a different type of contract and maintenance schedule as opposed to typical ICE vehicles. So that's run by another one of my peers. And then the third business unit, which is Global Connected Living, which is what I'm responsible for. This is all about protection, support, trade-in, and upgrade of devices. Predominantly large portion of this business is around mobile phones and mobile devices. And the best way to think about it is when you're buying a device, you typically have an old device with you. It could be an old iPhone or an old Samsung, some sort of a smartphone. And most carriers, retailers, and OEMs that we work with ask you to trade in your old phone when you're upgrading to the new one, because it's a device that's still got some value, maybe not in the US or in the UK, but in an emerging world, an iPhone 10 or an iPhone 8 is still extremely valuable. So that trade-in incentivizes the customer to come in and upgrade to a new phone. And we'll get into a lot more detail associated with that. And smartphones have become such an important aspect of what a consumer owns today, that protection and making sure that it's always available, it's not broken. Imagine a day in your life without a smartphone these days, right? It's a mini crisis, right? Like in my household, I tell my wife that it's okay if we are running out of food, but as long as we have Wi-Fi and our kids have their smartphones, they'll be happy, right?
Yeah.
So it's almost paraphrasing of what how important the smartphone is to the average consumer. So protection of that has become an extremely important element of doing that. And then if you break the phone, we make sure that you're well covered and supported based on your priorities. You may say that I'm okay, my screen is still working, just send me a replacement phone and I'll send the old phone back. But you might just say that, no, I don't want to wait around. Give me an option to get it fixed in the next couple of hours. So we'll find you a store next to your house that has coverage for your phone and get you protected. And it's all covered through technology. And we'll talk about that a lot more. An emerging aspect of that part of the business, Neil, is home solutions. As you can imagine, during the pandemic, the consumer's relationship with their home has changed, right? We are spending more time at home, working from home, learning from home, dining, entertaining, receiving medical care and services from home. So the battlefield between the mobile operators and cable MSOs have shifted from being in the smartphone to protecting and supporting everything around the home. Because people have been buying more connected devices, but that has got more needs that they need to make sure that these devices are supported, because about 39% of connected devices get returned back to the retailers because people struggle with getting them connected. And you see cool advertisements, hey, Alexa can command your device to do something. But when you set it up, it doesn't work. Alexa doesn't want to listen to you. And immediately that results in a call or a frustration, resulting in the device being returned or in a very expensive tech support call. So we make sure that those type of situations are eliminated and the customer is well supported throughout that process. So those are the kind of main areas that Assurant deals with. You asked earlier, how did I get here? So prior to this job, so I've been with Assurant for a little over 2 years.
Yeah.
And prior to this, I was a CEO of a company called Hyla Mobile. And Hyla was the preeminent company that was focused exclusively on trade-in and upgrade. So the scenario that we talked about earlier, where a consumer is upgrading a phone, say with a carrier like AT&T or Verizon here, or a Vodafone or a O2 in UK, they're all offered a trade-in promotion. And we had the technology platform that enabled that transaction. So when a customer goes into a store or goes online for buying a new phone, the first thing that they'd be prompted with is, hey, what are you going to do with your old phone? Do you know that you can get X amount of dollars or pounds for these devices? And then the transaction continues on. If the customer agrees, they get the benefit of those devices and of this promotion. And then the device gets sent to one of our warehouses, our device care centers, where we had specialized technologies that are used for testing, grading, and data clearing that phone. The testing determines the grade of the phone, right? And for simplicity's sake, you can think about them as A+, A, B, C, and recycle grade, right? A+ are remorse return devices. Like you bought a device, you don't like it, within 10 days, you go back and return it in the original package. US law doesn't allow you to resell those devices as new devices. So they go into this remorse return, and they are, of course, very high value devices because they're practically brand new. They are brand new, not practically. And then A are, light scratches here and there, and so on and so forth. And then there are devices that we get occasionally less than 2 or 3%. They no longer have economic viability, right? They're, say, Blackberries or old Nokia phones and things like that, but we responsibly recycle them in order to do that. So once that process is completed, we have these big data platforms that inform us of the best markets in the world where we can fetch a fair value for these devices. These are usually export-free zones like Hong Kong and Dubai and other places where there are major traders who buy these phones and then disseminate into different parts of the world where they see demands. And we find these markets and get these devices out into those markets and make sure that the people who are buying them are vetted, because we don't want these phones falling into any illegal hands or improper hands where it could be used for any nefarious purposes, etc. So there's a lot of compliance and regulatory matters that go behind the scenes before we onboard a buyer to bring on board. So Hyla became very successful. So I was not the founder of Hyla. I originally joined Hyla in 2014 as the chief technology officer. And within a year, the board asked me to become the CEO of the company. And we essentially turned the company from a commodity buying and selling company for devices to a technology and services company, which do all the things that we just talked about. And in 2019, there was a lot of strong interest in the company because we had established ourselves as a strong player with most major carriers and retailers in the US, as well as some of the major players in Japan. And we also had won some recognition in circular economy space from World Economic Forum and IEEE, etc. And the interest in the company started to grow from big players like Assurant. And Assurant always had an interest in partnering with Hyla in many ways. And when we started the process, Assurant all throughout led the process. And in December, in fact, interesting story, in January, February of 2020, when the pandemic hit, we were ready to sign the deal and we had to push pause on it because uncertainty in the economic climate and everybody was worried about what is going to happen. But then in August, we resumed the process, and in December, we closed the transaction. And my entire team continues to still remain a part of Assurant. They've all got very good responsibilities within the business unit, and we continue to work closely with the team that I inherited subsequently as a part of this new role that I've had since 2021, March or April of 2021.
And just to set the scene for our conversation today, I'm curious here. I'm not sure if there's any stats you can share, but how many mobile phones and connected devices do consumers get rid of each year, and how are they repurposed?
Yeah, so my team did an excellent job of kind of refreshing all those numbers for me ahead of this call, Neil.
Yeah.
So according to the Waste Electrical and Electronic Equipment Forum, which is a global forum that manages this type of data, 5.3 billion mobile devices are discarded in every year. And this is kind of astounding, right? I mean, if you think about it, that's about 3/4 of human population, right?
Yeah.
But there are all kinds of electronic devices that people sit on. We experience this ourselves, right? I mean, we upgrade a phone. We say, you know what? I might be using this phone. Let me throw this in the drawer.
Yeah.
And then 3 years later, you're looking at it. Well, I need the space in this drawer, and I need to get rid of this. And it's still not easy to get rid of electronic waste. Like in the county that I live in, there is one spot where you can take electronic, like if I have an old TV that I want to get rid of, there is one spot that I have to take, and they're not open at convenient times. So I have to make sure that it is there. They're closed on weekends, which makes it, extremely inconvenient. So it's a classic sort of government operation. But so it makes it very difficult for a consumer to do that. So it's not on the surface of it, it sounds astounding, but it's not surprising to me at all. Just anecdotally looking around how many devices get discarded. But if you look at it, on the economic side, in the year of 2022, just last year, we returned almost $4 billion, about $3.8 billion to U.S. consumers through mobile device trade-in and upgrade programs. So you can imagine if people who put these devices in their drawers and eventually toss them away, or they let it decline to a value where they don't have any economic value left in them, they are actually wasting money, right? Not to mention, we'll talk about the eco impact of this in a while. So from 2021 to 2022, that is about a 25% increase in the amount that was returned to consumers. So this is catching on as people become more aware of the fact that the old device that they're carrying around in their pocket has a very viable economic value that they should take advantage of, because as we all know, used electronic devices are a depreciating asset, right? The longer you hold on to it, the more deteriorating its value becomes. Although I want to say during the pandemic years, 2020 through mid of 2022, it was an anomaly. We actually saw used phones values either hold steady or slightly increase. And that is because of the supply chain crisis that the pandemic created. And we can talk more in detail about that. But just to wrap up the numbers, last year, for those many devices, we repurposed about 17 million devices in total. And to do that, we are a B2B company. We work very closely with carriers like AT&T and T-Mobile and Verizon, Xfinity Spectrum, the cable operators, KDDI in Japan, Telefonica and Vodafone in Europe. So there are many, many major players who are actually continuing to become important partners in this quest. Not only because it economically makes sense, but they are ESG and sustainability is starting to become a very important aspect of how these companies think about, what they do every day, and is it in an environmentally sustainable manner. I named a lot of carriers. There are also retailers like Best Buy. There are Costco and Target, and then OEMs like Google, Apple, Samsung. These are all major players who are all getting into the act of using trade-in and upgrade as a mechanism to stimulate upgrade of devices.
And I suspect listening to you there were people all over the world shaking their head in agreement, because just about everybody I know has one of those drawers full of devices. It's almost like a museum when you open up some of them drawers, going right back to BlackBerrys and Nokias, like you said a few moments ago. So I guess the big question is, what should people be doing with all these old devices sitting in their drawer that, let's face it, we've all got lying around the house somewhere?
Yeah. First and foremost, anytime they have a device like that, they should think about trading it in. When they are doing an upgrade. And it doesn't have to be just for themselves, right? It could be for anybody in your family. And the carriers, retailers, and OEMs have made it so easy. If you think about it, last year, some of our clients were running trade-in programs that said, bring in any smartphone from any year in any condition. It doesn't even have to be a working device, right? And they were getting $200, $300, $400 in trade-in value. So, so the first and foremost thing that people need to be thinking about is this is money that is sitting in their drawer, and it is money that is depreciating in value, if you will, right? It's like one of those currency in Latin American countries that due to inflationary pressures decrease in its value quite a bit. So I think it's very good. And our team did some survey last year, and we talked to a variety of different consumers, and we asked them, when you didn't trade in your phone, what did you do with that phone? Because we are curious, right? I mean, what do you do it? And this will give you the answer that you're looking for. 42% of the consumers held on to their old smartphones. 24% gave it away, which is actually a good way of repurposing it, right? We don't have any problems with that because, hey, my child is just about to become the owner of a first smartphone, and anybody who has children know this, that every child loses their first phone, right? So it's always a good idea to give them a used phone so that they can get used to it. Even if it's damaged, even if they lose it or damage it, it's not a significant financial impact. 7% recycled it, right? They went into a recycling station, or they saw a recycling kiosk and they just dropped it in there. 6% sold it. They went online. They were the financially savvy people, said, hey, I'm going to look around to see if somebody wants to buy it. Direct to consumer, eBay, any of these online channels will allow you to do it. And 5% committed the atrocity of throwing it away. I'm actually glad that it's only 5% because it used to be a lot higher just a few years ago. But here is the interesting part. The 42% of the people who held on to their smartphone, 61% of those people never, ever went back to using it, right? because they it's just not viable to use it for a variety of different reasons. If you upgrade it from 4G to 5G, you're never going to go back to a 4G phone, right? It's just a waste of money. Sometimes the SIM size changes, right? Because if you go into a micro SIM, the micro SIM may not fit into a larger phone. If you have a larger SIM, it will not fit into a micro SIM slot. So it's all kinds of compatibility issues. So most of the people when I talk at various industry events, Neil, I usually open by asking people, how many people have upgraded their phone in the last year or 2 years? And about 80% of the people raise their hands. Then I ask, how many people actually traded in their phone? And it'll be about a quarter of the room that'll raise their hand. And that I've never gone beyond asking that question, because then it just gets into, what did you do with your phone? Then you have to get into a lot of conversations with people. So it is so it doesn't, these stats don't surprise me. It holds the same results that I get when I do an anecdotal survey of people in a large room. And I plan on doing that again at Mobile World Congress, when I'll be speaking on Tuesday next week, because it's always interesting to see. And I've seen progressively more hands go up when I ask people if they have traded in their phones.
And before you came on the podcast today, I was doing a little research, and I learned that you were saying that automation is helping improve sustainability in the e-waste and recycling market. For anyone that's not seen this, can you expand on this? Because I think we're all aware of the impact automation is having on the workplace, but don't necessarily think about it improving things like sustainability and e-waste and recycling, etc.
Yeah. So it's a great point, and it's a very, very relevant one for our industry, Neil. If you think about what happens to a phone, and I would really encourage, if you have an opportunity, either in the UK or if you're ever in the US, we can arrange for you to visit one of our device care centers. It's fascinating to watch. I mean, think about 1.3 to 1.5 million phones a month passing through a large facility like that, right? So there is a lot of repetitive tasks that happen, right? Just simple task of opening up millions of boxes every year, right? So first and foremost, it creates a safer environment for our workers, right? Because there's a lot of repetitive stress injury that happens from, repeated tasks associated with even things like opening a box, right? Which requires a lot of, it's a big cardboard box. You lift it, put it on a station. You're using a box cutter to very carefully open it. If you're opening, hundreds of boxes during a day, it can create repetitive stress injury. Secondly, if you think about labor cost and labor availability, labor cost has increased quite a bit across the world, particularly in the United States and in Western Europe. So it starts to become a little bit unsustainable to have a regular practice of just hire more people when you have more phones, right? Because it's cost prohibitive. Thirdly, availability of labor has become a big challenge as well, right? Especially after the pandemic, because there are increasingly more people who just decided to stay back home. More people have retired. People have decided to, go into other professions, get retrained into other areas. So these hourly wage technicians, the availability of the labor has become a big challenge as well. So when you take all of these factors into consideration, we started to make some investments into automation. And some of it is like very simple automation. To start with, is we have had a box making robot for a very long time. Why did we decide to invest on that? So there are two reasons. Two reasons we need boxes. One is, when we work with large carriers like AT&T and T-Mobile, when they collect devices in their stores, they need to ship it to us. And as a part of enabling that, we are automatically connected to their order fulfillment system. And we know when they're low on boxes, we just create these boxes and send it to them. Now, depending upon the size of the retail location, they may want bigger boxes or smaller boxes, because the bigger the box, the cheaper it is to ship. So we can customize these boxes. Now, imagine if we were asking a box maker to do that for us based on what we want to do. It becomes prohibitively expensive, right?
Yeah.
And we also noticed that these boxes, typical boxes, are not made very optimally. If you look at typical boxes, the seam of the box is on the inside of the box, right? And that actually prevents us from putting more stuff into the box. So typically about it fits about 4 fewer phones than otherwise. So our box making robot takes that into consideration, and the seams are on the outside of the box. That means we can fit more phones into the box. So we take and then the amount of cardboard that is wasted when we make a box is extremely low compared to like an industrial box making thing where it's one size fits all, and they make it in a non-sustainable fashion. So that's the basic thing. But when you think about other parts of automation where these devices are coming in, the box gets opened automatically by a robot. It just cuts open the top, and then these devices gets picked up and put onto on a conveyor belt, if you will, and then it automatically scans in the devices. When we determine that something is like an old Nokia candy bar or a device, we don't need to spend a lot of time testing and grading them because they are going to be recycled. So they get routed in a different direction for efficiency. We just wipe all the consumer data off of it, and they go straight into a recycling location. So it helps us become more efficient in how we sort through all of these things. And then finally, I want to talk about one element, which is the biggest factor of human inconsistency in the grading factor. So if you pick up a used phone, and if I pick up a used phone and Sarah picks up a used phone, we will look at the same devices and we could have different interpretation of it. You might say, this looks like an A. I might look at it and say, well, I think it's an A plus. I think it can fetch a better value for it. Sarah might look at it, it's like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. You guys don't have a good eyesight around these things. This is a B grade phone, right? Yeah. And that's the inconsistency that and the subjectivity that humans inject into grading of a phone. So we invented this technology called vision tunnel. It's fascinating. I mean, these devices get picked up by a robotic arm, and it gets cleaned and wiped a little bit because there's always a little bit of dirt or oil and things like that onto the phone that can be confused as a smudge or a scratch. And then this device gets into this box, which is outfitted with specialized lights and 6 different cameras. And it takes about 2 seconds to analyze each of these phones, 1.8 seconds on an average. And it'll take a quick picture of the front and the back. And it sends that information to a neural network, which can compare it against similar devices and can say that, well, I saw 3 scratches on it, but they are only this long and they're only this deep. And that means this should technically be qualified as a B grade device, not as a C grade device. And it'll be consistent across the board.
Wow.
And then another robotic arm picks it up and it inspects the sides to see, because usually when a phone is dropped, it's the side that gets damaged. If the glass doesn't get scratched, it could get dented, it could get smudged. And then it tests for all of those things. And then that determines the final cosmetic condition of that. So we are eliminating subjectivity and human error out of it by injecting this level of automation. So aside from the benefits that I talked about in the cost and the concern for human health, what this does is it allows us to get the best possible value for the devices, because when we are doing this on behalf of our clients, like the carriers and the retailers that I talked about, it's a huge responsibility and a burden on our side to make sure that we are grading the devices right and we are finding the right markets for them. So automation plays a pretty substantial role in how we manage these devices.
And I suspect there will be a lot of people listening all around the world, and they have those devices in a drawer somewhere. And the thing is, I suspect that many won't have any idea the kind of difference that they can make to people's lives. So can you tell the listeners a little bit more about how repurposed technology can impact consumers all around the world in both developed and emerging markets around things like improving sustainability and connectivity? Because there's so much, those devices, neglected devices in a drawer, can make a real difference to people, can't they?
Absolutely, Neil. You're 100% on spot. Before I talk about that, let me talk about the business model that Assurant has created, right? Generally, when you talk about doing something sustainable, doing something for the environment, it sounds very good to everybody until people figure out what is the economic model here. This is going to be really, really expensive to do, right? And then people lose interest in it very quickly because at the end of the day, everybody's running a for-profit business, right? Or most customers that we deal with are running a for-profit business. So if you think about it, our business model, everybody benefits. And this is what I'm most excited about it, because how many times in a life do you get to say that you run a business where every ecosystem partner that gets touched actually benefit from it? So let's start with the consumer who's actually trading in the device, right? They get a financial benefit for an old device that they have been using as they're upgrading to a new device, right? So they are very incentivized. And some of the more advanced customers of ours, like Deutsche Telekom and Telefonica and others, are actually factoring in their CO2 reduction factor. So Biju traded in an iPhone 10 or a Samsung Galaxy S20. They actually tell me, based on the solutions that we have provided to them, that how much carbon offset I have created by trading in that phone. So I have a feel-good factor as a consumer as well. Now, the carriers, retailers, and OEMs benefit from it because they get me in as a consumer, and they get to sell me a brand new phone, and they get to attach me to their network for the next 24 to 36 months, right? So my customer lifetime value goes up for them. And then we find a market where we can get the money back for what they have spent in the trade-in value for the device. Then along the way, repairers, refurbishers, they all get employment because these devices are getting repurposed. Then when this device ends up in the hands of one of the consumers, actually, I'll touch on that last. Let me touch on the environment first, and then I'll touch on the consumer in the end. So along the way, we caused one fewer device to be manufactured, lesser precious earth metals to be extracted out of the ground, less manufacturing pollution to be created, and more circular economy factors to be created by reusing that phone in some part of the world. Oftentimes it is right here in US or in the country that we repurpose the device in, but about 50% of these devices end up in emerging world where otherwise a high-end smartphone would be out of reach for the average consumer, but a high-end smartphone that is about 40% of the typical retail phone is very much within the reach, and they will try to do that. So that brings me to the benefit of the consumer. So they now can become a part of the Apple, the Samsung, the overall smartphone ecosystem, where otherwise they were using a lower end smartphone, which typically the lower end smartphones have lower grade bill of materials, especially in a hot and dusty country where the voltage fluctuations are much higher. These devices tend to break much more frequently. If you look at a typical Apple phone or a Samsung phone, they tend to last a lot longer. So they are able to use those devices and, more importantly, become a part of the app ecosystem that gets created around those two devices. So if you look at how many devices has a smartphone displaced, right, it is stunning. And that tells you how important it has become to an average consumer, no matter where they are in the world, right? It has replaced your cameras, digital cameras. It has replaced MP3 players, navigation device, camcorders, alarm clocks, car radios, on and on and on, right? Medical devices are being replaced by smartphones. Just to put it in perspective, from 2006 to 2017, which is the 10-year horizon of when an iPhone was launched, cameras, 66% fewer cameras, digital cameras have been sold, 87% fewer MP3 players have been sold, 80% fewer navigation devices have been sold, and 93% fewer camcorders have been sold, right? So wow. Typical consumer who otherwise would have spent money on all these type of devices, especially in an emerging world where money is tight for people, now gets displaced by a smartphone. And the higher end smartphone they get, the better pictures they can take, the better videos they can record, more security associated with these devices to conduct financial transactions, etc. If you look at internet usage, almost 3/4 of internet users, 72.6% to be exact, will access the web only using their smartphones globally. I personally know, even in the United States, there are young people who don't have a home internet connection. They say that I have a smartphone, I use that for my internet connection, and if I want to use that on my laptop, I set up a hotspot, and that's how I use it. So that has become, the de facto mechanism for accessing the internet. So these repurposed devices play a significant role in bringing up the societies to be more engaged in the smartphone ecosystems of the world that we all get to enjoy every day.
And another trend I was reading about recently was that older models of smartphones are now beginning to outsell new smartphones. Did this surprise you? And do you think this trend will continue?
Not at all. In the beginning, when I found out about it, not only did it surprise me, but it excited me. I said, "Wow,
Yeah.
this is fantastic!" This little quest that we thought that we were starting in the interest of doing something good along all the lines that we talked about, it's actually starting to play a major role.
Mm.
So I think IDC publishes this data, and based on the data that we looked at recently, the worldwide shipment of used smartphones, including refurbished and other used smartphones, will reach about 283 million units, would have reached in 2022, which is last year.
Yeah.
And the amount of this reflects about an 11.5% increase over the 2021 number, which was about 254 million. So if you compare that to the number of smartphones that were shipped, new smartphones that were shipped last year, the absolute number is much higher. It was about 1.2 billion units, but that declined year over year by about 11.3%.
Wow.
So percentage-wise, the number of used smartphones shipped has increased roughly by about the same amount as the decline in new smartphones. Now, we shouldn't read too much into that number being almost the same. That has nothing to do with it. It's not like these phones are cannibalizing new smartphones or anything. Last year was kind of unique because of supply chain related challenges. Not as many new smartphones were available to be sold in majority of the countries, particularly US and Western Europe and Japan. But overall, we are seeing that there is a substantial increase year after year after year on the shipment of used smartphones and adoption of new used smartphones by consumers who are either cost conscious or more sustainability conscious. In Europe in particular, carriers and retailers have started to push pretty aggressively for encouraging consumers to use more pre-owned devices or certified pre-owned devices, as they are seen as more sustainable solutions that can be adopted for upgrading on to the next G network, whether it's a 3G to 4G or 4G to 5G type of capabilities. And if you think about why that trend is happening, there are several reasons, right? Price of new devices. Yeah. We know that smartphones are getting more and more expensive every year. And a lot of consumers happen to believe that they're not seeing as much innovation in the newer smartphones that are coming. The cameras keep getting better, screens are more resilient and better quality, etc. But otherwise, they're not seeing a lot of new innovations that are coming out of these devices. Economy has been on a downturn since the beginning of pandemic, so less disposable income available for consumers to upgrade to latest and greatest. Foreign exchange has been a big factor. Dollar has been extremely strong over the last year, particularly in 2022. So if you compare across the board, the same devices have been more expensive in Europe and in Japan by about 20%. Because of the foreign exchange impact of foreign exchange. And then there's a good network effect because consumers trade-in values have been high because carriers, retailers, and OEMs have been encouraging trade-in of devices. So as a result, consumers have become more aware and they're taking advantage of the high trade-in value and trading in more devices, and that yields more devices to be available in the secondary market. So when you combine all of these things, the conditions are very secular for the pre-owned device markets to be increasing year over year.
And considering that customers are getting more aware of cost and sustainability and the role that they should be playing in that, obviously you guys are moving with these trends too. So what's next for you? Where do you go from here?
Yeah, we see tons of opportunities, Neil, ahead of us, right? Because if you think about it, still only 25 to 30% of customers are still trading in their phones in order to do that. And trade-in is kind of become the only factor that is available to encourage consumers to upgrade. Because if you think about it, all mobile operators have a 5G network. They all have nationwide coverage. They are all offering unlimited data, voice, and messaging plans. And they're all selling smartphones, Apple and Samsung devices. So what is the differentiator, right? So the differentiator happens to be what sort of trade-in value are you providing for the devices, right? So that becomes an attractive factor to come in. And imagine what happens when at the beginning of a transaction, you put money in that customer's pocket. They tend to spend a good portion of that money in the store. I came in to buy an iPhone 14. You know what? I got some money. I'm going to upgrade to an iPhone 14 Pro. You know what? I'll buy that noise canceling headset to go with this device. I'll buy an extra charger, right? So all of these stimulate spending. So it helps that retail location tremendously when they're offering that. But smartphones are not the only devices that are trade-in eligible. If you think about other expensive devices, the headset that you're wearing on your head after a few years, you're going to want to upgrade to that. That's an expensive device, but it also has a lot of residual value because somebody else will refurbish it and find a market for it. AirPods, tablets, smartwatches that we wear around our wrist. These are all devices that are eligible for an upgrade. Think about it. There are 100 million AirPods sold every year, right? And imagine the e-waste that'll generate if people decide to throw that in their drawer and then ultimately just dispose of, in an inconsistent manner. So I think there are lots and lots of opportunities to do that, and then to protect all of these devices together, right? Because I could just as well have a problem with either a functionality or losing one of my AirPods. And then a protection plan comes into play to make sure that it'll be there to help replace that and support that in a economically viable manner. So I think we have lots of opportunities in front of us. We are also starting to see a trend amongst consumers where they want a menu of options available when they are signing up for a service, right? Trade-in is one option. Protecting all of my devices and another option. They would like to see security solutions because cybersecurity is a concern for them. So we are starting to think around solutions like when you trade in your device, you can apply towards anything you want. If you don't want to apply towards a device, you can apply towards buying a security solution that will protect your devices better, right? Not just protect the physical device, but also every transaction that's happening across that device. So we are looking at that the world is our oyster at this point. There are tremendous opportunities, and we see the trends that develop in US and Japan and Western Europe with a slight delay catch on in other parts of the world. So we are chomping at the bit to take these into other countries like India, Southeast Asia, and Africa, and other parts of the world, which are growing economically by leaps and bounds every single day. And we see that as opportunities that these technologies and capabilities that we have developed here to be applicable in that part of the world as well.
Wow, there's just so much food for thought in everything you just said there. So I wish you the best of luck on your journey this year and beyond. But we started the podcast today talking about your origin story, what would put you on this path. And as we come full circle, I'm going to ask you to look back and reflect on your career now, because none of us are able to achieve any amount of success without a little help along the way. So I'm curious, is there a particular person that you're grateful towards who helped you get where you are?
Wow, that's a great question, Neil. There are so many people, right? And when I think along the way who have given me guidance, direction, advice, how to handle certain situations, etc. But first and foremost, the teams that I have worked with and I continue to work with here at Assurant, maybe I've just been incredibly lucky. I have always had phenomenal teammates. It would be impossible, even unimaginable, to have even a fraction of the success that we have had in various businesses along with that. each and every one of them have been better at their jobs than I will ever be. So I first and foremost, I have to thank all of my teammates who have ever been a part of, anything that I have done in my life. Secondly, many of my bosses that I have worked for, including Keith Demings here at Assurant, the biggest thing that they have all done for me is to trust me with opportunities, right? Even this job that I'm doing currently, there are many aspects of this job that I still don't know fully. But there are very, very good teammates that are surrounding me, will make sure that if I have a question, however dumb that question might be, they'll be patient in answering. But the leadership of the companies that I have been a part of have taken a step, whether they are CEOs or bosses that I have worked for, or board of directors that have been overseeing my company's activities. They've always given me and my teammates the opportunities to go explore, try new things, take some risks. As the old saying goes, if you're not willing to risk the unusual, you have to settle for the ordinary, right? And so we have to be able to step up and risk that unusual. And these bosses have given me these opportunities to do that. So I'm immensely thankful to all of them for whatever amount of success I've had in my life.
A beautiful answer. And before I let you go, for anyone listening wanting to find out more information about Assurant and all the things we've talked about today, what's the best starting point to do that, or even contact your team, etc.? Can you point everyone in the direction of your website?
Yeah. Please go to assurant.com. And you can check us out. Our fantastic marketing team is always responding. Any question that you might have, if they don't respond directly, they will route it to the appropriate business unit leaders or business development teams. They'll be able to get back to answer questions. We are also a company that publishes a lot of information. We publish a quarterly data about the number of devices that we are repurposing and the impact that has on consumers' life, as well as the environmental impact that it creates. So we want to make sure that we are doing everything in our power to educate and empower the entire ecosystem to learn from from what we have learned thus far and try to take advantage of it. So please do go to assurant.com, and if there's no information out there that you're looking for, send any of us an email, and we'll be more than happy to assist you.
Brilliant. Well, I'll have those links to the show notes so people can find you nice and easy. We covered so much there, talking about the fact that you repurposed more than 17 million devices last year for companies such as AT&T and Vodafone, and also what we should all be doing with those old devices sitting in a drawer. And we all have them. But I think more than anything, it was your personal origin story, what put you on this path, and the people you're grateful for. A great conversation today. Just a big thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you, Neil, for the opportunity to share the Assurant story and what we do along with our partners. This has been just great to speak with you, and look forward to future opportunities to speak in person when possible.
So a big thank you to today's guest for talking about how automation is helping improve sustainability in the e-waste and recycling market, and how repurposed technology is impacting consumers around the world in both developed and emerging markets. Ultimately, improving sustainability and connectivity. So many big takeaways. I'd love to hear your thoughts. We have people listening in 165 countries, all with different attitudes to recycling those smartphones. A lot of people will be buying new, but as we said in the podcast, there's a lot of people now that are buying used smartphones rather than replacing their handset with a brand new phone every year. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on everything we talked about today. And as always, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, @NeilC.Hughes. Let's keep this conversation going. I'd love to hear from you on this one, so please let me know. Other than that, I'll return again tomorrow with another guest. So thanks for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.